So hi everyone, welcome to this lovely session we have here in Annecy with the team of the Wild Robot. I'd love if you could go down the line, just introduce yourselves for everyone.
I'm Jakob Jensen. I was the head of character animation on the show.
I'm Heidi Jo Gilbert. I was the head of story.
I'm Raymond Zibach. I'm the production designer.
Chris Sanders. I was a writer and director.
I want to talk mainly about two things, which is the look of the film and the story as well. So I was curious because it seems to be that you guys have developed some really insane techniques just to get kind of the visual aesthetic across, in terms of how painterly it looks, you know, how certain things in the foreground seem more deconstructed than blurred, that kind of stuff. I was wondering who wants to jump in and answer that question.
Well,
Yeah.
I could probably talk at length about it, but you know, when Chris and I first started, we were talking about a painterly look, and we also talked about how the recent films at Dreamworks were had some new techniques in them. Bad Guys, Puss in Boots were starting to push, you know, what you could do as far as really changing up the look in CG. So we really built on top of that and expanded all those techniques to create tools that were actually more flexible for the artists, like not to just model by pulling little points, but actually brush drawing tree limbs. The modeling went faster and it was more expressive. So things like that, I think, are what you're recognizing in all those little pieces. And a lot of other very technical things were happening. Something that maybe people can understand is that a lot of times everything had a hard edge because it was modeled. But for us, we developed using transparency on edges and inside of forms so that you could actually have brushstroke textures and see through them and have areas of softness built into actual assets.
It's a bit of a bold-faced question, but why is that so important to this story? Like, why is that so important to the look of the film? Why is that such a big part of? It's been very easy just to make this photorealistic, you know what I mean? So I'm just so curious why you guys pushed into that space.
I think we felt from the very, very beginning that it was critical to making this story work, to allowing it to resonate the way it was supposed to. The Wild Robot, the book that Peter Brown wrote, is all about a piece of high technology that's lost in a wilderness. So getting the greatest amount of contrast between Roz, the robot, and the environment that she was in was critical to just how the audience would immerse themselves in the story. And so getting an organic, I always say analog look to the environment would give us that contrast.
Well, I guess best stories are contrast-based, right? It's all about building contrast. And I'll say this as a compliment to you, Chris. You know, the stories that you've told across your career, you've always been very good at finding relationships and building contrast in that sense. So I was very excited to see The Wild Robot and see what you guys did, because obviously it's a great story there, but how do you get emotion from, you know, a robot who is a robot who just wants to serve, you know, against animals? So I guess figuring that kind of stuff out must have been an interesting challenge. Like, how long did that take to get to there?
You know, okay.
Last week.
There's kind of two things, and I think Heidi should and Jakob should weigh in. In some ways, I think there's an empathy that we get almost instantly when we have a story about a robot. I think that mechanical things like that, I always instantly empathize with. So there's an innocence and a vulnerability to Roz that you get almost immediately. And again, her in that environment, it's not just contrast, it's conflict. Because Roz's programming is in conflict with the creatures around her. The programming in each of them is really the opposite of one another. So initially, I think you do empathize with her, but then getting to where we were was a years-long process that really never ended. It's till we ran out of time. Yeah. No, not till we ran out of time. We did find it.
I think that was the hardest. I would say that was the hardest thing for us in story was the opening scene of her walking through the forest was one of the last ones for us to figure out, and I think it was because it had so much story weight to carry or load to carry. But it was also like, how do you make an audience care about a robot that's not acting like a human, or it doesn't have emotions that we can relate to as humans. And I think where we kind of landed was by giving her this task. Like she's looking for a task and she's failing, and all she wants to do is help, and she is failing. And the one thing that I feel like where you really start to care about her is when she gets to the field and she's like, did anyone order me? And she's all alone. And yeah.
Another thing is, interestingly, we quickly abandoned this maybe old trope of finding how mechanical she should look as far as her motion, and that's when it started clicking for us in animation. The moment we just treated her like a character. There is a specific arc, like her internal change is also manifested in her motion throughout, and you'll if you look hard enough, you'll see it change. But it was really when we started thinking about her as a character, simply with character traits like any other character, that you started to connect with her, right?
I mean, she's very flexible, right? You know, in terms of a character, she can imitate a lot of creatures. Like immediately, she starts imitating the crab. You know, so, but she's also a cool robot.
So interestingly, that changes. That's one of the things that is kind of freaky for the surroundings. All the animals on the island is freaked out by this, and they call her the monster. And again, to elicit empathy from her surroundings, I think she sort of learns, without it ever being explicitly announced, to just take it back a notch, to sort of exercise constraint and become more and more human-like, you would say. I mean,
oh, wow. Yeah, the opposite of animal-like.
That's right, or animal-like.
Put it, yeah. She becomes more human.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. But I was so fascinated by it. She just seems like a kind of a utility instrument, right? Just trying to find her place in the world. And yet she has everything she needs, really, if that makes sense. And all bits are moving. And like, are you breaking that rig constantly, trying to get her to work, or how?
Well, we did constantly. Our supervising animator, Fabio Lignini, on his very first test, which basically was meant to be what we call rig wrecking, just going through the motions of what this rig ought to be able to do and doing sort of technical check points. He also immediately made her a character by making her feel self-conscious, but he really took her and stretched everything, and I wish I could show you, but it just looks nuts. It goes from being a very sort of humanoid silhouette, and then it just goes nuts.
Yeah, and Story kept coming up with gags that involved her gadgets too, so we had to keep designing new things that could get deployed and ways that she could use her body, and finding those limitations or finding new things that she needed to do was really fun on the design level of that character.
Like a Swiss Army knife.
She evolved, yeah. She is a Swiss Army knife.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
But I think that sticker gag is particularly effective, you know. That's a very good one. That's smart.
That was this guy.
Yeah, that came like that was one of those things like live in the room we were talking about. Like, she should do something weird. She should do something surprising. I think that it took a while to find the right start for her, and I have to credit Heidi and Steve McLeod for really finding that version of Roz. In the book, she's always looking for a task, and all this came from Peter's book, and we had a conversation with him at the very beginning. And a Rosin robot is it's designed to work in a human world. That's why she looks humanoid. She occupies human spaces, and she does tasks. She's a generalist, so she could work in a hospital. She could work in on a farm. She could work in a house and things. So she's adaptable, and she learns and things like that. But we started with her just looking for a job, and it was too one note, and it was too flat, and it wasn't really endearing us to her. And through a long process, we discovered, because of Heidi and Steve, this version of her where she's really enthusiastic. And I liked that because I thought, she is supposed to be a product, and like, she comes out of a box, and you probably spent a great deal of money on her if you bought her, so she'll probably come out of her crate and say, congratulations, well done, and she'll reinforce this very expensive purchase. So she has this optimism in the very beginning that really, I think, it's vulnerable and it's endearing. And part of that, I thought, well, maybe she'll give away stickers to people so that like if you didn't purchase her, you might think about purchasing her in the near future. And so that's where that all came from.
Yeah, she has a demo mode. Like if you bought a fridge right now and it's hooked up to the internet, it's gonna say it's gonna say something to you and ask you like, should we stock this and that? And that's exactly what she does. She has this great display mode actually right after the beat that you mentioned in the or right before that I thought was such a great. And I was like, how are we gonna do that? How is she gonna make a big display, a big demo mode? And
then there's the little chime from like a dishwasher or
like Alexa or the dishwasher or
washing machine,
dryer and washing machine kind of sound effects you have on your appliances now. We just thought of all that stuff because she's basically all those things.
Yeah, it was like she was gonna look for a task so she could help you, but if you don't ask for one, then she's gonna badger you until to tell you all the ways she can help until you give her a task.
Yeah.
That's so endearing,
and then lacking anything else, then she's in self not publicity, but the sticker thing. She's self-promoting.
Well, it brings to mind the question of identity then, right? Really and truly, kind of a robot coming out of a thing that her whole function is built around tasks and other people, yet you guys have put her in a situation where she has to become something else, right? And this kind of sense of who she is and finding out what to do with the world. I think that's a really powerful mechanism, for storytelling and something like this, because we can have all the fun of, here she is, puts in mind my Alexa, I just want to set it up, not listen to it straight away, that kind of thing. But it endears me toward it. But then after that, I start to put my identity onto her and vice versa, whereas this is a living creature, with a supercomputer trying to find its life in this world.
I think we talked about this the other day. We gave her a slogan in the beginning where she says, "A Razum always completes its task." And we liked that because of the nice dichotomy it had with the mother's task is never done. And that's kind of goes to what you're talking about with identity, like flipping that identity on its head.
And full credit to Jeff Herman, because we were trying to find a slogan that was memorable, and I think he was the one that said, "If Razum always completes his task, just ask." And I was like, "That's it, we got it." Like, that's wonderful.
You guys, you're nearly finished, right? At this stage, have you completed everything, or no?
We are nearly done.
I thought so, and then they came up. Yeah, there's always a new shot. There's always something.
Effects shots are still coming in, and some lighting is still coming in. So about 5 weeks.
Wow. Okay. So after this, you're flying straight back, finishing up.
Yeah, I'm going straight to Skywalker. Those sounds that you're talking about, they're designing some of those sounds right now. So I go to Skywalker for 3 weeks for the mix, where we put this amazing score together with the sound effects and the voices in a perfect balance.
I go back and I live in lighting and color finishing for the next 6 weeks.
Back to work.
Yes.
Back to work for you.
This is such a great break to do this, because you need that energy to finish and to come out of Annecy with this kind of energy and go back to finishing a film. It was hard getting here because we had to do a lot of work just to get here, and then to go back, though, I think it's going to be pretty cool.
But then you had that lovely moment when you showed the film, right? And how much people are hungry for exactly what you're doing.
I think we could all talk about that, but we worked so hard on the look of the film, and it's something we talk about a lot because the look is really an important part of how this thing is going to work. And we talk about that enough that sometimes if a movie isn't working, you talk, "Oh, it's really beautiful," right? If you have a terrible personality, but they're really pretty, right? That's not the case here. I think there's an amazing story behind this, and the look is part of the reason that it works.
I don't know, but in that theater, the reception that you got, that energy, I just thought was stunning, and that the sequences, just not out of context, but in chunks, it really landed, and that's all you hope for when you're doing all this work, on the look and the story, and everything you're doing is to try to really engage that audience, and to get that proof here is amazing.
It sounds weird to say it, but we're around it so much that we have adapted to it. I guess we've acclimated to it. So I guess it sounds silly to say, but I wasn't sure if it was evident. that it was that different, and it is like everybody who's seen it that I've talked to is one of the first things they talk about is that it really is completely different than anything they've seen before. And again, in service to the story, but it's. I can say this because I didn't create the look. I asked for it, and I hoped for it, and I set the goal for it. But it's absolutely groundbreaking, and I think it's a game changer for animation in general. I think we've come out of a tunnel of limitations, not of our own limitations, just the technological limitations that we've lived with for decades now. And I feel like we've all, as an animation community, finally broken free of that, and now we're open and to maneuver look-wise anywhere we want to go.
Yeah, I think part of that is also that we have the people that have grown with this technology now that can use it in a way that we used to be very limited, thinking, well, the computer can do that, it can be very photorealistic, we're just going to do the best version of that, and you had a lot of people that were immersed in that technology and knew it really well. But now we've had enough of movies, this is the third one, where we actually have artists creating this stuff, and they're not, as a production designer, you're constantly asking, well, what if we did this, and I used to hit a lot of walls, and it wasn't just the technology all the time, it was also the people, because they weren't comfortable. You had to do a whole movie. How are we going to do all this? There's always nerves. And
it's an interesting sort of, it's a mix of the novelty of the new technology with returning to a classical approach to what we used to do as far as drawing and painting,
Yeah. I think that's been an eye opener for me, and when Chris came in talking about the references that he did, and then thinking, well, yeah, there's a reason why that art captivated people on Bambi.
Yes, yeah. I heard a lot of Tyrus Wong
Yeah,
talk.
I mean, Disney, they showed you a different world every film. And every time you were in for a new experience, seen through an artist's eyes. And I think that's why the stuff is landing the way it is that we're showing people a world depicted in a way that, to me, when great art is done with the subject of nature, you're feeling the love for that nature through the artist, and now with this technique, you're getting that, I think, through this medium.
And the razor's edge of that then as well, right? Because you're totally right in everything you're saying. You're talking about pushing the medium forward, but the medium is also built on stories. And this seems to be a beautiful story. And that's obviously credit to everything that you guys are doing, because that's the base level of returning to something, right? An artist will look at the art, but everyone else will also come back for the story, and that's what people come to. And the art on top of that will elevate that story totally. Like you see that with all the groundbreaking films that have come in recent times, like Spider-Verse. That wouldn't have been as good if the story wasn't as good as well, But I'm not saying that to detract from your art.
No, absolutely. That was a revelation, I think, to everyone. And it had an incredible look and an incredible story. And I think that was a wake up call for everybody that we could do so much more, and to, I don't know, get energized about seeking different looks.
But it only really does work if the convergence of all these disciplines serve one thing, which is the story. And I hope we successfully did that. I feel we do.
I think you guys did, from what I've seen. Anyways, people were weeping, in that theater, and you only showed parts of that movie, the opening, and then you thankfully came out and said it's not a spoiler. Everyone's like, "Is that the end?" Nope. Have you done this to us? Yeah. Is there anything you guys feel like we haven't talked about today that you would like to get across?
There's almost too much to talk about, I think. I would say that one of the things that I'm proud of all of us for is just getting Peter Brown's story from the page to the screen, and getting all the important things about that story on the screen intact. And that is due to everybody, I think, coming together and I think really adopting this movie. I liken it to Roz adopting this little Gosling. It was a labor of love on the part of everyone at the studio. At one point, I was watching an effects shot, and I called Peter Herman, the producer, aside, and I said, "Why does it look this good? I've never seen anything that looked this good before." And he said, "People love this film." And the team at Dreamworks just really adopted this, and like, I think, went above and beyond.
It's so nice. Nature's
right.
come into the. Yeah, sorry, Chris. Go on. Above and beyond.
Nothing more. That's like,
those moments with Chris in director approvals where we bring stuff up and show him, and he's like, just as a director being blown, then you know you've done your job when the director is as excited about what you're doing. And yeah, it's super gratifying.
But again, gratifying to see the response here at Annecy. And it's like, I know it's an intensely positive crowd, and we just hope it translates beyond that, you know.
Yeah, you'll never see a more technical crowd than Annecy when it comes to animation, right? So they're going to appreciate all that stuff as well. But they're all, you know, those students are aspiring storytellers, and they've loved the craft as long as they've been here, and they bring that excitement, right? So I think they're a pretty good test audience, to be fair, you know. So congratulations, guys, on the film so far.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
And good luck. I can't wait to see it, you know.
Awesome.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
That's
Thank
it,
you.
guys. Thank you. I'll release you from your...